What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Ebony 100 Power Talks. This is going to be fantastic. It is brought to you by Vitamin Water, and we get to talk about living your truth, living your true self, showing up authentic, being you in the truest sense. And we talk about it all the time, but it's not easy. And we live in a social media driven reality where many of us have brands that are bigger than our true selves. And some of us live in a real world where we got no brand and are incredibly happy. And I get to talk to a brother that has navigated both of those spaces in a really unique way. He is an activist. He is a brilliant musician and singer. He is an amazing spirit and somebody that on a daily basis is giving not only for himself, but for a community and a people, and frankly, for humanity that he cares for so much. My brother, my friend, Deon Jones. What's up, brother?
What's up, Unc? How's it going?
Man, listen, on most days, I am better than I deserve. And so I'm in an incredibly thankful place, man. I'm really excited to talk to you about this subject for a number of reasons. And the first thing I want to know for you is, what does truth mean to you?
Yeah, truth. First, I'm a believer, so truth is standing in integrity and honesty and character. I always say that regardless of how bad the response may be, or how regardless of what the consequence even may be, the idea to be known as someone who is honest and truthful, I think is the first part of particularly any relationship, but the first part of also you being the happiest person and at peace of who you can be also. So it's not only being honest and truthful to other people, but it's being honest and truthful to yourself.
And it's interesting, D, right? Because we live in a culture that elevates truth, keeping it real, giving everybody what you got, being your full self. I mean, these are things that we hear over and over again. But if we're honest, it's hard because we live in a very public driven world, whether that's social media, or whether that's having a brand, or whether that's operating in this semi-perfect or as close to perfect self as possible in order to advance whatever agenda we have. And that's coupled with the fact that people are really sensitive.
Yeah.
And so you talked about, regardless of what the response is, how hard is it to show up as your full self when you're dealing with all of those realities?
Yeah, it used to be very hard.
For you?
For myself. It used to be very hard. I'm blessed that I've had great mentors in my life, you included. By you all doing your work, and after doing your work, sharing those lessons with me, that I have been able to be sort of on a fast track to be my full and complete and whole self, and how I show up in the world very early on, not only in my personal life, but in my career as well, whether it was DC or currently here in LA. The interesting thing about it is I think that so many people live for the idea of being affirmed and live for the idea of being validated, particularly by others, that they begin to direct their movements, paths, thoughts, journeys in a way where they feel that people will admire them, people will uplift them, if I do this thing this way, then this person won't be mad at me. And it's hard to the point that I made before, it's hard to sometimes deviate from that because people are afraid and are fearful of the consequences. I've been, particularly over these past 2 years, have been deeply doing my own work, obviously the learnings that mentors have placed upon me as well, to not have to do that in a way that I definitely did before when I was in my late teens and early 20s living in DC.
Well, and let me ask you, because you talk about the last 2 years, and I know your story. Your story has been well documented, but I don't know if everybody watching knows that you were in an incredibly traumatic experience on the tail end, in the midst of a protest, and were shot with a rubber bullet. And I'm curious, had you already been on a trajectory to embrace more of what was authentically important to you? Or was that almost as a believer, a road to Damascus experience where, you were moving one way and boom, this thing happened that made you see the world and yourself and how you show up in it very differently?
Yeah, I think I think it was a little bit of both. And it was also, as I've shared with you before, some struggle in that after that moment. So first, I had already been on the path to begin the journey of making an album, putting out my music, doing it in a way that was unconventional, through art and collaborations and all these other things. And that had started actually in 2018. We were going to do this whole big show at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, etc. COVID hit, and then sort of everybody just, until we figured out what the hell was going on, sort of went their separate ways. When that moment happened, one of the things for the Mass Mocha show that was actually happening is the artist Glenn Kino, whose exhibition it is, we were actually putting together the project with Sunday Billy Sunday still being a part of it. John Lewis was going to be the first person to walk through the show. This is how much the shit had changed. Was going to be the first person to walk through the show. And then we were actually working to get Common and Bono to sing the song together, because Bono,
I remember you telling me that. Yep.
I wrote the song. The week before the world shut down is when we saw that everything was sort of locked in to do that. The world shut down again. People went in different directions. And after I got injured, Glenn called me and was like, "Yo, D, you should just sing the song." And so I ended up calling John Batiste. Glenn called another Glenn named Glenn Kochi from Wilco. We got Butch Vig, the legendary producer, to come on board, and we ended up making the song. This is about August. So I got injured in May, so this is in August. And we ended up doing the song, put the song out just as like, okay, this is something that I knew I could do and something that was more truer to our selves at the time, particularly as we were preparing for the show and sort of the reopening of as the world was opening back up and stuff, beginning to figure out how to open back up. And we ended up doing it, and the song became a hit. And we raised a lot of money for Fair Fight. And after that, it was sort of like off to the races of, okay, I knew I had this album idea. I started working on that again. And then I had the time as well. And so it sort of fast tracked something that I was slowly picking at. And I always say, I guess when you're doing what you're called to do, stuff moves forward in a fast way.
But I'm curious, because you went straight from me asking you about your authenticity and this really traumatic moment to the music.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a bridge there. Because you don't go straight from I'm in the hospital recovering from this attack on me to going into the studio.
Yeah.
And so there had to be, and we haven't talked about this in detail. So there had to be this moment where it's like, well, who in the hell am I going to be? Like this activist shit isn't proverbial for me right now. Like I got shot for real.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what my recovery was going to look like. I didn't know what my life was going to look like. And now there's this opportunity to say, there were a whole lot of people that wanted you to double down on now being this face of activism.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're being pushed by people who care about you, but also have their own agenda.
Yeah.
You got to be confused about what in the hell am I doing now, because life's got to look different. And I'm curious about how you found authenticity in that moment so that you didn't get sucked up into what would have been the easy way to show up coming out of that hospital room.
And those were, you're absolutely right. So those were some of the key struggles that I had. So one, and to this day, I battle with that term activist because, you know, at the end of the day, I was a human being who felt something and saw something wrong and wanted to do something about it, right?
Yep.
And it was funny to me because it's like, okay, now I got shot in the face. Now everybody calls me an activist. When I had a whole life before that, I'm going to have a whole life, you know, after this moment as well. It was a blend of just what was happening in the world at the time that made me move in that direction. And part of it was when I got, one thing that my doctor told me was that the bullet was an inch from my eye and an inch from my temple. So I would have been blinded or I would have been dead.
Yeah.
And then when I got home doing the recovery, as you know, I had bloody noses, I was dizzy, you know, scared to go to sleep at night. And I remember saying one time, thinking I wasn't going to wake up, I remember saying, you know, God, I know you didn't allow me to live out there in the streets just to be at home and die alone. But if that had happened, would I have done or started or even been content with the life I had lived and was currently living based on what I believed and knew it for sure what my calling was? Now, what I know that it is for me to move people and inspire people through my talents and who I can show up as through my music and my art. But I have been doing that just in a different way before, whether it was, you know, the political stuff in DC, whether it was stuff I may have been doing in corporate America, being adjacent to folks like Oprah and Jesse Williams, etc.
Yeah.
But what is my true way of honoring that calling? Through a gift that God gave me, right? And I know that gift was through song and music. And at the same time, you know, you had Chadwick Boseman dying, the whole Kobe thing happened, and so many people were losing, and so much life was being lost suddenly.
Yeah.
You know, and it changed my whole trajectory on not only how I would continue to move throughout the world and in the future, but changed my trajectory on like, if I couldn't do, what was something that if I couldn't do it, I would die, as Toni Morrison would say. And hers was, you know, writing and being able to mother well.
Yeah.
Mine, you know, what I call my non-judgmental dream of my life, had always been to be able to do music fully as not only myself and expressively, but do it in a way that that reaches folks. And sort of that's what has happened, and it is beginning to happen. And I've seen the impact of it. and I've seen the impact of it now. So that was the bridge. That was the bridge of it.
So talk to me a little about, you said when we first started talking that one of the things that happens so often is that we're afraid. We're afraid of what people will think of us. We're afraid of how people will respond to us. And fear is real. I mean, I've dealt with it in my own life, and I think I'm constantly trying to encourage myself to be courageous, because sometimes fear is so much a part of our subconscious, we don't even realize that there's this coding of not just cowardice, but safety, right? That we're leaning into. And I'm curious, what have been some of the fears that you have had to face? And specifically, how have you faced them?
The biggest fear is the fear of failure.
Mm-hmm. And what does that mean, right? Because I hear people say that all the time, but what does that mean? Like, straight up for you, Deon, dude, I know you. You've been next to Oprah, you've been next to Jesse, you've been next to Jay-Z, you've been next to, like, you literally find yourself and you take advantage of the universe opening up opportunities for you to be in these places with really incredible people who actually honor you.
Yeah.
And so what the hell are you afraid of when you've seen the universe,
so that's
often?
the thing. And that's the thing, right? So it was the fear of failure. Like, okay, what if this doesn't work out? I'm doing this, like, literally head on, like, first priority in my life right now, right? Making that decision. And I know you made a decision like that before as well. Like, this is my number one thing.
Yeah.
So is this going to work? Secondly, and early on, it was like, well, can I really do it? Thirdly, are people going to receive it? And fourth, it was, if it doesn't work out, what I'm going to do after. Now, this was very, very early on. And so, but that goes to that first point, like, I was going back to immediately wanting some validation that this is the right thing to do from external forces, right? And as I've done, the work, and, spent time alone in my thoughts and stuff, what I realized is, and as you just alluded to, what I realize is all I'm doing at this moment is betting on myself again. And so the same spirit and the same soul that is betting on myself now was that same little boy growing up in the country in Mississippi, being the boy on the porch, waiting for my dad to come and pick me up. He never came to pick me up, seeing all the abuse and experiencing all the abuse that I did, and saying, like, this will not be my life. Like, I'm going to do something different. That same bet that I took when I left that environment and went to DC, met you and so many other people, and, interned at the White House, became a Truman Scholar, all that type of stuff. Same soul, same person betting on myself. The same person in 2016, when I made the decision to leave that life in DC behind and come to LA, not knowing anybody, not knowing what I was going to do. What many people don't know, I also drove Lyft the first 2 months. And I think that's the first time I've said that on a public platform. First 2 months, bet on myself. And in those 2 months, Mike Strautmanis, President and First Lady's best friend, introduced me to Glenn Kino, who brought me into the Oprah world. And what I realized in this process, as I was holding on to those fears, like, it's the same, who I see now is the same bright-eyed little boy that knew that, like, I know I'm gonna do the work. I know I'm gonna work hard. The same bright-eyed little boy from Mississippi is the same bright-eyed man now, betting on himself again for a new chapter in his life. And so that is what allowed me to let go of those fears that I had before. And I think anybody who's majorly successful, Jay-Z, Paul Judge, all these other folks talks about it, it's really just betting on yourself,
But betting on yourself requires some stuff, because often, especially when somebody like you, right? When so much of our success can mistakenly be connected with being next to the right people. So it's easy for me to bet on Oprah. It's easy for me to bet on Jesse. It's easy for me to bet on you know on Jay-Z, on the number of other people that you've been around. Vitamin Water has an interesting slogan about out of the box hydration. And you said something a second ago that really spoke to me. It was about doing the work in private. And I'm curious about, we talk a lot about the out of the box stuff we do creatively, or as you did this project, but what was the stuff that you did out of the box in private? That's the reason why you were able to come out of this transition even more authentic than you'd ever been before.
Yeah. First thing I'll say, particularly to your point, I've been blessed to have some great landing pads as I make a bet. But even with those great landing pads, for me, as I'm in my practice now, as much as I learned, as much as I gained, none of that was ever mine.
Say more.
So I have this thing where I call being the adjacent. And to your point, when you're adjacent to a powerful figure, a powerful structure, people celebrate your success in that. And as much as I learned, and those folks are mentors to me now, as much as I learned from them, I knew that particularly part of my thinking is I knew that I wanted my own. I knew I wanted something that was my baby, my thing, that I developed, worked hard for, and birthed, and can't nobody take that away from you. That was part of me also betting on myself to do this, go on this journey. In regards to my private time, so I was off Instagram from December 21st of last year to September 10th of this year, off of all social media. And one thing that allowed me to do was to be focused in the work, because there was so much
noise,
people were just talking, pontificating as well, you know, also so many announcements of things. And I knew I could get caught up in what wasn't happening for me in the moment, but what I knew was coming for me. So I did that. So that sort of like focused me. It also helped with my mental health and my self-esteem, right? The second thing that I did was really, again, going back to what I said earlier to that Toni Morrison quote, is really asking myself, I made that list. What are the things that I could not live without?
Yeah.
And the one,
which is really huge.
Yeah, that I just could not live without. And the one thing was music. That was like the biggest thing. I was trying to think of another one, but it was just really that one. And I literally dedicated all of my time to it. Spent my own money. Went into the studio and just went ahead, and the album I'm working on now, and just went for it. And what people don't see in the private time is I wouldn't call it the fear, because I had got over that, but it was going through the emotions of something actually happening in your life that you had always dreamed about. And that has a strong level of excitement to it, but it also has a strong level of vulnerability. So I had to
Yeah.
bring up a lot of stuff. I had to lose some friendships. I had to lose some relationships. I had to isolate myself, which, as you know, as a social person, that was somewhat difficult. I had to isolate myself. And that was those were some of the things that I think for what I would have done had the world not shut down.
Yeah.
That were just so unfamiliar to me.
Mm-hmm.
In order for me to become the man that I am today.
Talk to me about just one example of one of your biggest inspirations of showing up as your true self, and why.
Like a person?
Yeah.
You know, someone I'm really proud of is Lil Nas X.
Mm.
And the reason why I'm incredibly proud of him is because I know what that takes. Obviously, his is such on a mega level. But with my generation and so many of us, particularly who, you know, started our journeys in politics and government and working in institutions on like Capitol Hill and in the White House, we were the first generation to sort of like break those barriers. Like, we gonna be here, we gonna be ourselves, and we gonna do our thing. And I remember a lot of us being chastised for that, a lot of us being reprimanded for that, because it wasn't the norm and what people thought of, what people, you know, generations before us were like, people shouldn't know that, you know, you should just keep that to yourself.
Right.
And
Respectability behavior.
Keep
certain things private, you know, all that kind of traditional narrative.
And one thing so I turned 30 in last month. And one thing that struck me that a few people said to me, either on the phone or, you know, via Instagram, they said that since the day I met you, you have always, at the core of who you are, been the same person. And that has been the hardest thing for me to do. And now I'm just like, I'm all in it. But before that had been the hardest thing for me to do. But when those people ended with, and that allowed me to do blank, and that allowed me to walk in this space as blank. That's something that I still process of the impact of, because I just feel like I'm just being me, and
yeah, people
say that. And so I look at a person like Lil Nas X, who is doing the exact same thing for his generation on a huge scale. That all makes you proud, but is inspiring. And to your first question, it is, what does truth mean to you? And for me, and that inspiration and that pride comes from to see someone being as honest as they possibly can be, and as they know how. Yeah, that's what inspires me in that way.
So I'm curious, there are so many people, there's so many of us that navigate showing up as our true self. And some of the most confident people I know have periods and moments where they are incredibly insecure and incredibly unsure of where they are. You know, you may get older, you may shift careers, trauma may happen. What advice would you give to people for just some daily things that you can do to lean into, and I'll be personal, right? Like, never in my life have I cared less about work than I do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because for the better part of my life, I have allowed work to define how I felt about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, from a kid. And it wasn't until recently that I'm like, yo, this is some bullshit. Like, literally from middle school track to high school track to Black Student Union to student government to the NAACP to working with Russell to BET to, you name it. I literally unconsciously made those things me. And I realized that I was working as hard as I was, not always for the purpose part, but for the identity part. Mm-hmm. And it rocked me to the core recently when I was like, yo, you've always believed in the things you did, but a lot of this was really about, I want to feel valuable.
Yeah.
And so I had to get to a place, and recently at 48 years old, man, I had to get to a place where I'm like, I need to turn all of this off. Mm-hmm. And probably for the first time in my adult life, I'm like, I'm not worried about what move I make next, as much as I'm worried about who am I at my core. Yeah. And it was that core work for me, that being centered work, that shutting down the noise, that listening for what I'm hearing from my God or from the universe or from my ancestors, that where whatever next decisions I make will not at all be about a position, a title, a project, an opportunity, as much as what do I hear the universe saying? What do I hear God saying? I want you to do now.
Yeah.
And who are you within that? Yeah. And for me, that truth part is so often disguised because we often describe truth as what do I do versus who am I? And so what are the things that you recommend for folks to lean into the who am I versus get caught up in the what do I do?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is I really do believe in the idea that we're responsible for our own lives and we're also responsible for our own happiness. And the first thing that particularly I started doing, and I think that people just start practicing, is saying the word no. And no is a complete sentence. And I have this thing now, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. Because
break that down real quick, man, because I think that's super important.
Yeah, before the pandemic, how many things were we saying yes to that we were tired, we knew we didn't want to show up to, we knew we didn't want to go, we knew we couldn't give our 100% best, but we did it, whether it was for a check, to people please, to, to fear missing out, all those things. And then you get,
and to your point, it's not hell yeah, it's yeah.
Okay, I'll go. All right, it's down the street, but do I really, really, really want to go? And even just starting in the small things of, do you want to go to the brunch? Do you want to go to, the day party, etc.? And you really don't. That is starting to allow you to be more truthful and honest with yourself, and more truthful and honest, obviously, again, with the people outwardly as well.
Yeah.
And so, not saying like I'm just like the king of no, and no has become my favorite word, because it's not. But
there's power in it.
But there's power in it. Power in me deciding my destiny, fate. That's sort of too deep on how I'm saying it, but like part of me in deciding how I want to exert, express, and give myself away to something that doesn't completely and wholly feel me.
But also your point earlier, I think, connects with this, because sometimes yes is a lie.
Yes, yes is a lie. That's the thing. That's the
so,
thing.
so yes is a lie.
Exactly, exactly. And so it's like, I say, if I don't feel like doing it, I say no. I'm in a place now where I can say no to some things I probably would have said yes to before. And even saying no to how you allow people to treat you, how you allow people to address you, and how people, and also with, again, as you and I had this conversation early on last year, but like people try to box you in, and I'm sure you've, over the course of your career, people try to box you in so
right
many ways,
now.
and even right now, right? And saying, no, that's not who I am, and this is who I am.
Yeah.
Are ways that slowly, as you keep doing it, like anything, it takes practice, and in the gym, exercising it, by practicing it, allows you to slowly move into that era of being truly your true authentic self, protecting your peace, protecting your happiness, which allows you to show up fully for yourself and the things and people that you actually really do care about.
I two more quick questions. One is, what is one thing you want people to feel who have never given themselves permission to show up in their full self? That if they did, you're like, yo, I want you to feel this, because before I showed up with my full self, I never knew I could feel this.
Yeah. Peace. Peace. And the early 2020, before the pandemic, I went through a transition that was sort of painful, as you know about. And I obviously, as always, you realize the blessing of things later down the road. But the peace that I have right now and today is unmatched. The happiness and the joy that just comes every day by getting up and doing something that I feel that I know and believe I was called to do, based on particularly how people respond, but also what I hear in my quiet time. When you get to that, the piece of this moment is unmatched. There's nothing that can phase you, to your point of like how work doesn't lead you anymore, and you feel how that, and you feel that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it shows up in so many beautiful ways at home with your family, and stuff like that. The piece that I have is something that I think everyone deserves. So, and it's literally, it's that word, peace. Yeah.
Yeah. You are such a music spirit. Give me 1 to 3 songs that define showing up your whole self. Because there's some people right now that need to start a playlist for they showing up my whole self playlist. What?
Yeah.
What are a couple of songs?
Yeah, the interesting, the album that will be my first album ever, the sermon of the album, if you will, it's a soul album, but the sermon of the album actually goes through a story of a person getting to that point, and taking off the mask, taking off all the things of people judging, and et cetera, and getting to a point of complete peace. What is inspiring me in this, as I'm doing this right now, of course, Fred Hammond's No Weapon. That's just like, I think with everything that people, what we're just going through in the past 18 months, And essentially what we run away from are the weapons that we think will come at us if we decide to. So no weapon, that's one. The other thing is, the other song is William Murphy's Praise Is What I Do. That's what got me through a lot of this past time. And thirdly, there's a song that was written by, and they're all gonna, because when I'm writing something that is, not spiritual, I always use that as my foundation. But there's a song by Maddie Moss Clark called I Can Do All Things. And though I grew up in Mississippi, the foundation of my life is church. And in the music that will come out and people will hear, they'll hear that in my voice and in some of the songs. But there's such a story and a awakening in gospel music that allows, even if you're not super religious, that's the thing, even around like churches being closed, people putting on a certain song, or particularly a gospel song, and listening to those words. There's one song, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's a line in it that says, I believe what you say because my confidence is in your faithfulness. And when I think about this ability for me to step forward and be my complete authentic self, live in my truth, face fears, bet on myself, everything that we discussed today, I know I can do all things because my confidence is in his faithfulness. And if we know anything about God's faithfulness, we know it's everlasting. Yeah. And so that's what, I feel that I held on to, particularly over these past 2 years. And that's what I feel that other folks can hold on to as well. That once you get into it, you got to exercise this. You got to be in the gym with it, and it's going to be painful. But once you get to start seeing some of those results, it's a beautiful thing, and the peace that you feel is amazing.
And I think that really is the message to go out with. I'm always reminded of Paul Laurence Dunbar in 1895 wrote, "We wear the mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies, that hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh, great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask." And he was just talking about how we as Black folks protect ourselves behind the mask. But there's pain behind that, and there's survival behind that, and there is arrested development behind that. And we are in a time where the mask doesn't suit us anymore. And that, to your point, no matter how much the pain, no matter how much the work, no matter how much the trial, no matter how long the journey, on the other side of that, showing up truth provides power and peace. Because at the end of the day, we're no longer operating in fear, but we're operating in love.
100%.
So I love you, brother, for sharing with me your journey. I thank Ebony for ensuring that this Ebony 100 talk is made available. I thank Vitamin Water for being out of the box, not only in their hydration, but in being willing to support conversations that we just don't have enough. And so I thank you, brother. And I'm looking forward to seeing more and more of your truth, because I know not only you need it, but the world does too.
Thank you, Ebony, so much.